Professor Diel van Lille, Executive Dean of the College of Business and Economics, Professor Kelvin Bwalya, our inductee for this evening, Professor Mjumo Mzeche, our respondent, who is also the Associate Professor of Technology and Operations Management at the University of the Witwatersrand, senior leaders of the university, members of Senate, and other academics. Our online audience on Facebook and YouTube, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Sanibonani, Huyenand, good evening, Tobela. It is indeed a great honor and special privilege for me to welcome you to the Professorial Inaugural Lecture of Kelvin Bwalya. As I do so, I wish to express a warm welcome to his loved ones, special guests, and his colleagues. This is indeed a proud and joyful, yet a landmark moment for all of you, for Kelvin, and of course, for all of us here at UJ, higher education in South Africa, and beyond. The inauguration of professors is a public ceremony in which newly appointed professors are inducted into office by the Vice-Chancellor functionary and deliver their inaugural addresses. The ceremony has its roots in the medieval university and serves multiple purposes. Firstly, it is an expression of welcome and an entry for new professors joining the circle of colleagues who are already professors. Secondly, it provides a platform for the professors to display their expertise in the discipline and showcase their research. Traditionally, in isiXhosa, we say, ukuthweswa isitanga kwisigaba sobunjengalwazi. This, loosely translated, refers to assuming the role of the professor. Of course, in colonial traditions subscribed to by universities, this refers to the gown and the cap. The wise one would accept a blanket, ingubo in isiXhosa. Once we have listened to the inaugural address, the gown or ingubo denoting the professorship will be formally assumed. We gather to bear witness to the entry of Professor Bwalya to the illustrious community of scholars at the university. It is a celebration of the contributions to the discipline and ultimately the impact on society. Professors provide the university with its identity, character, academic legitimacy, and integrity. The inaugural lecture is a rite of passage following the confirmation of the appointment of the person as a professor. This evening, we will listen to Professor Bwalya as the gown goes to town. By this I mean that the power of the inaugural address is when the expertise is showcased beyond the corridors of the university and reverberates with society. It stands out as a moment of pride for the incumbent, the family, fellow scholars, the university, and ultimately society. For the German philosopher and diplomat Humboldt referred to the university as a whole community of scholars and students engaged in a common search for the truth. Newman talked about teaching universal knowledge. Recently, universities have been viewed as instrumentalist, serving the purpose of the economy or utilitarian in purpose. I would hope that we can break out of this narrow conceptualization and reflect on the university as contributing to the public good. Edward Said, in an article on defiance and taking positions, offers formulation of the ideal role of a true intellectual as, open quote, one who commands a vast knowledge of the person's discipline, who is rigorous in the analysis of literature, who views being an intellectual as a vocation, the intellectual who considers it necessary to step into the public sphere and speak truth to power, namely to question, interpret, and understand authority rather than consolidating it. To step out of the boundaries of the academy, to connect oneself, to affiliate oneself, to align oneself with an ongoing process or contest of some sort, perhaps with the aim of improving the lot of the oppressed. The intellectual who functions as a kind of public memory to recall what is forgotten or ignored, to make the connections that are otherwise hidden, and to provide alternatives for mistaken policies, end quote. It remains then for us as a university with a Pan-African vision to derive our mandate as intellectuals and as professors. How do we embrace the role of a professor as a disruptor while continuing to be flagship carriers of our disciplines? Ladies and gentlemen, this evening we'll listen to Professor Bwalya as one further step in the journey of being a professor. This is a journey which does not culminate once this lecture has been given. It is a self-reflective pause in the journey of the professor, with a promise of more to enrich our minds and simultaneously contributing to the rich intellectual body of work in the discipline. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now invite our Executive Dean, Professor Diel van Lille, to introduce Professor Bwalya. I thank you. Ke a leboga, ndiabonga baie dankie.
Vice-Chancellor Functionary, fellow academics, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this incredible occasion tonight. A special word of welcome to the Bwalya family, and tonight we celebrate the fine performance and achievements and contribution of a son, of a brother, of a father, of a husband. So Kelvin, what a pleasure to share this evening with you. I'd also like to acknowledge I've heard from Kelvin that his father is also listening tonight online and watching us from afar. So it's a pleasure to meet you in this format, and congratulations on your son's fine performance. He is leaving big footprints here at UJ, and thank you for shaping him and your mother and his mother into the man that he's become. It is my pleasure to introduce Prof Kelvin Bwalya. So Kelvin profiles himself as a passionate millennial poised to position humanity at the very end of intellectual and knowledge value chains. He professes the application of innovative and progressive technology solutions and platforms in business environments. His research interests include 4IR-enabled e-governance, computational modeling, information architecture, blockchain, ambient intelligence, and fog cloud computing. His journey started a while ago. He started studying at the Moscow University at the Power Engineering Institute, where he graduated with a bachelor's in engineering and, I should add, with distinction. He then continued to study at the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, where he achieved a master's in computer science, also with distinction. And then finally he came to UJ, where he has earned a PhD in information management from the School of Consumer Intelligence and Information Systems here in the College of Business and Economics. His professional journey started in 2005 at Samsung Electronics as a junior programmer, and he was soon promoted to senior Windows programmer, specializing in Fortran, C++, and Java. A highlight at Samsung was his involvement in the digital multimedia broadcasting project, as well as the Low Vision project. These projects won several Best Paper awards at conferences and secured patents registered in the USA. In 2007, Prof Bwalya joined the Zambia Research and Development Center as the Executive Director of Research and Development, where he has raised some close to $500,000 from various famous international funding agencies. In 2009, he joined the University of Botswana as a senior lecturer, where he was cardinal in strengthening the program in information systems. In 2017, he joined, that was perhaps his wisest decision. He joined the University of Johannesburg as an associate professor, and by 2019, Kelvin has rose to a full professor. Professor Bwalya is an NRF-rated researcher at level C1. That means that he is considered as an established researcher, having supervised 7 PhDs to completion. He has published over 100 peer-reviewed contributions and presents an excellent geographical dispersion of journal articles in high-impact journals. He has collaborated with and is still collaborating with highly established researchers in the field, such as Professor Manuel Bolivar at the University of Granada, Prof Robert Davidson at Hong Kong University, Prof Alexander at the University of Pretoria, Prof Reddick, the University of Texas at San Antonio, and Son Yi Leung at LG Electronics. So he's also in demand. Over the last 2 years, he's given 6 keynote speeches on his area of expertise in Hong Kong, locally, Zambia and China, and he will soon deliver a further 3 keynote addresses at 3 international conferences in the course of this year. He is a fellow of the International Engineering and Technology Institute, a visiting professor and a college advisor at the Rankosin International College of Creative Entrepreneurship, Raja Mangala University of Technology in Sri Lanka, as well as visiting professor and member of the exams board at Alagappa University in India. Prof Bwalya is also a seasoned external examiner at the master's and doctoral level. He's an organizer of conferences, a member of editorial boards and technical committees, and he serves as a member of various professional organizations. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Prof Kelvin Bwalya.
Vice Chancellor functionally and Chief Financial Officer of the University of Johannesburg, Mrs. Mamorari, Professor Daniel van Leeuw, Executive Dean of the College. I want to say thank you, Daniel, for your leadership that you're providing in the college and for your friendship. You make my work easier. I also want to recognize the presence of the executive leadership group of the university who are joining us online. Professor Mujumo Muzeche, who is seated with us here from the University of Wits. I also want to say hi to colleagues in the College of Business and Economics, and also not forgetting colleagues from the School of Consumer Intelligence and Information Systems. I also want to recognize my family and friends who are joining online, and just to say thank you for supporting me in the journey. In my professional career, the old adage, it takes a village to raise a child, holds. I'm where I am because of different mentorship programs that I've benefited from. A lot of academics throughout the world have mentored me in many aspects of my journey. I also want to say that I've benefited from systemic mentoring programs that are available at different higher education institutions in Africa. I'm also fortunate to be mentored by amazing scholars from around the world, especially Professor Kandusa at Open University in Zambia, Professor Mutula from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Professor Robert Davidson from Hong Kong City University, Professor Chris Reddick from University of Texas at San Antonio, Professor Mpo Mwepe from UNISA, Professor Patrick Ngulube from UNISA, Professor Gabriel from Wuhan University of Technology in China, Professor Nathan Mjama from the University of Botswana, also Professor Igor Tutov from George Mason University in the USA, Dr. Mike Haley from Lancaster University in UK, Professor Young Monroe, who supervised my master's degree from Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, also Professor Dennis Ochola from the University of Zululand, and Professor Manuel Pedro from University of Granada in Spain, and many others are too numerous to mention. I would also like to dedicate this professorship to my parents. My parents have taught me a lot of lessons, and some of those lessons are that I need to respect people regardless of their status in life. I also need to ensure that I focus on positive energy. People react to different situations based on what they experience on earth. So I should be an ambassador for positive energy. I also want to say that my mother taught me that hard work pays no matter the cost. So we are encouraged to work hard in order to achieve things in life. Last but not the least, I also want to thank God the Almighty for granting me the favor to overcome challenges that I've faced in my life, and to ensure that I'm able to stand where I'm standing today. Because of this, I'm forever reminded that without God's grace, man is nothing. Also, thank you to my immediate family for recognizing that I'm a man who is busy every day, a man who has deadlines throughout the year, and these deadlines don't finish. I want to remind you that service to humanity and the quest to contribute to human development never ends. Now, I'll get to my lecture, to the key aspects of my lecture, and I promise I'll not be technical, but I'll give the basic aspects of what I've done so that I take you through my journey. So before I jump into the gymnastics of e-government, please allow me to show you a brief background of what I've gone through. So basically, I concentrate on e-government, and e-government has been changing over the years. My expertise is mostly in mathematical reasoning. I've done a lot of mathematics, and whatever I do is based on probability theory. As you've heard from the Executive Dean, I studied at Samsung Electronics, where my focus was on computer vision. I did computer vision, I did machine learning, and I did image and signal processing. And I was very fortunate to be included in the digital multimedia broadcasting project that actually won a lot of patents at that time. I also want to say that my area interest of research was electrical engineering. When I started teaching, I actually taught in electrical engineering at the University of Zambia and University of Botswana. So I was interested in such things as management of damped harmonic oscillations in electrical circuits, how to remove white noise from electrical circuits. I also was interested on modeling of electrical power supply using what is called the Kalman filter and other aspects of electrical engineering. In my next slide, I want to show you the different phases of my research journey. My research journey has gone through different phases because I'm highly agile, and in order to survive in this research environment, you need to keep rebranding yourself. So the first phase included the understanding of the demand and supply aspects of e-government, and in the demand side, we looked at what do the customers of e-government look for. For example, what do people and businesses want in e-government? Then we also looked at supply side, where we concentrated on understanding what different stakeholders have put in place in order for e-government to succeed. At that point, we also looked at fundamental aspects of e-government, looking at the status of e-government development in different countries of the world. When we get to phase 2, we looked at platform design, and at that point, we were looking at how to design the different portals for information access in e-government. Then there was also a time when we concentrated on system integration. How do you integrate the different heterogeneous systems that are in the government, in the e-government environment? Also the concept of data and information governance, and also the different institutional frameworks in Africa, especially the legal and regulatory frameworks. In the next phase, we are now in the era of the 4th industrial revolution, and e-government has to adapt. We are no longer looking at e-government in it with a traditional lens. We are looking at it with a 4IR lens, where we concentrate on application of AI in the design of e-government systems. So at this stage, basically in phase 3, what we are doing is the design science of e-government, and coming up with what is called AI augmented government. So in order to design AI augmented government, the first point of call is to understand what technologies of the 4th industrial revolution can you play with in order to come up with the different applications. So one of the technologies is AI, of course, and using AI technology, you are able to come up with some degree of intelligence, some degree of automation in e-government. We're looking at blockchain, which actually concentrates on the aspect of accountability of e-government. The other thing we're looking at is Internet of Things. How do the different entities in the Internet, how can you connect them? And we are now moving to Internet of Everything in order for anything that exists to be connected in the e-government environment. A question of storage, remote storage. We are looking at cloud computing. We are looking at the new version of cloud computing, which is fog computing, where computational modeling is done on close to the data, which is called the edge. And another aspect of e-government that I'm concentrating on is autonomous vehicles. Vehicles will be moving through the environments, and they will be communicating, exchanging different sets of data. So that defines the baseline technologies that I'm looking at in as far as e-government is concerned. So in order to achieve AI, I'm concentrating on blockchains, the design architecture of blockchains. I'm concentrating on robotic process of automation, which is a software response to designing intelligence and automation in e-government setups. And also, because of the information specialization, we're looking at the different protocols, information routing protocols that we can use in e-government. So out of that focus, we have 3 main areas that we are looking at. Currently, I'm looking at the design of topologies and information architectures so that I can achieve what is called ambient intelligence in vehicle-to-vehicle communication. And these vehicles can be autonomous or non-autonomous vehicles. The second point is the use of process automation, the software response, in achieving intelligence and automating the different e-government systems. And when that is achieved, machines are going to communicate with one another, exchange information, and people are going to access information from e-government systems within the flash of a second. So the third one is spatial intelligence, and in this one we are looking at information availability, pervasive information availability in different environments. So with that, our key focus is the design of information topologies and information architecture. For information topologies, what we are looking at is basically the arrangement of the internet, the different entities in the internet. And when you look at the information architecture, you're looking at the high-level arrangement of different protocols and so forth in the internet. So in order to achieve AI in government, we need to ask basic questions. before we talk about the technologies, we need to look at what is called a progressive approach to data and information management. Asking such questions as what kind of data do we have at hand? Where is it located? How to access it? Understanding the access path. How do you connect the agent, which can be a machine or a human being, with the information content? And how does information flow from one place to the other in the internet? So we need to understand these basic technologies and basic conceptualizations in order to innovate, because if we don't have this basic knowledge, then we can't innovate. In fact, IBM has put it plainly that without AI, there's no AI that you can achieve if you don't consider information architecture. So in my area of expertise, the design of information architecture and information topologies is quite important. So in one of our research outputs, we've suggested an architecture to achieve spatial intelligence in smart cities. This is called Internet of Vehicles architecture. How do vehicles exchange information in different environments? When vehicles littered in different environments, they form what are called ad hoc information networks. And these networks, the agents in that ad hoc information networks exchange information. So the focus of our research is to look at each component of the IOV architecture. What are the specifications for each block? So in this one, we've got 3 different blocks. We've got the sensing block, where we are looking at sensors. We are looking at information gadgetry in vehicles. How do those exchange information in order to come up with an intelligent environment? We're also looking at the computing layer. What kind of technologies are needed? And not only at the high level, we're also looking at the ISO architecture. What kind of layers should we concentrate on in order for information to move? And of course, the application layer, so that we can achieve that ambient intelligence. So this research is ongoing, but I also want to say that our research is guided by principles that are borrowed from other fields. We have the principle of the graph theory, which is borrowed from discrete mathematics. And in this case, what we have here, the reasoning in our research is based on what we call the lemmas. For this one, we say it's the basis of VANET information architecture. VANET is the vehicular ad hoc network. And in this case, we have a multi-dimensional, a 3-dimensional graph, alpha, beta, and omega. And we look at the components of that graph. Like the alpha is the set of vehicles which are nodes in the graph theory. And then we look at the possible information links between the different vehicles. And we are guided by the concept of networks in information systems, distributed systems, in order to understand that. And then the third one, we have the set of protocols. The protocols define how different entities on the internet interact with one another. And it gives the set of rules through which information is exchanged between one vehicle and the other. So we're looking at that aspect. That is a high-level presentation of our focus. So when we get to the next one, vehicles can be closely, they can be in an environment where they are very close to one another. And in such environments, there's application of wireless networks. And there are 2 components that we are looking at, investigating how they can be incorporated into the information architecture. The dedicated short-range communication. And we also have the robust header communication, which is responsible for decompressing the packets so that they can observe the wireless bandwidth in an information system. And because of the 5th industrial revolution, what we have in the next slide is incorporation of IP version 6 NEMO, which is a new technology that is used in order to achieve 5G communication in wireless communications. The next one is our thinking that guides our research. We are saying that these information protocols need to be intelligent. And we define an intelligent protocol as a protocol which can self-evolve when placed in an uncertain environment. Now, these protocols are coded, they are trained at the beginning, and sometimes they have to make decisions. Machines have to make decisions based on these protocols. If these protocols are coded in a certain way and they are placed in an environment which is uncertain to them, they need to adapt and make decisions. And in order to do that, we are using the Bellman equation, which I'm going to explain without getting into the details. Okay, now in the next one, what we've proposed is a robotic process automation models that are needed in order to achieve contemporary AI augmented government. Now, in order to realize AI augmented government, there are certain issues that you need to look at. The issue of integration, different integration frameworks is still being actively researched on. The question of training machines optimally with local data sets so that they can make decisions that are contextually relevant in any given situation is something that is ongoing and needs to be achieved. And also the ability of machines to analyze unstructured and structured data, which is big data analytics, so that they can perform predictive analytics is something that we're looking at. And then in any government setup, there are different rules and policies that need to be followed. Human beings have to follow these processes, these rules and processes and policies. Machines also have to follow these policies. How do you train machines so that they can be intelligent and make decisions in that regard? So in the next slide, what we have is the proposed robotic process module in order to achieve what is called EGAS. EGAS is e-government as a service. In order to achieve e-government in such a way that it is a critical service for public government, what are the different modules that countries need to look at? And this is a blueprint which has just been published in Springer. There are different consoles that we look at, and for each of these blocks, our research gives specifications on what needs to be achieved. So there are several emerging areas that we need to look at in e-government. The question of ethics. How do we ensure that machines follow ethics like human beings? Asking questions like, is your algorithm ethical? I'm lucky that at the University of Johannesburg, there's a Center for Data Ethics, and I think we are going to have a lot of discussion in that regard in order to advance this aspect. Machines need to be ethical. Machines need to think as human beings in order for them to have a chance to replace human beings in different business processes. The other aspect which borders on integration is the question of digital identifiers. How do you bring in digital identifiers so that they can bring all the data together to achieve a concept called data integration, data automation in the information ecosystem. Now, in order to achieve all this intelligence, there's also a critical research question that is coming up. How do you optimally look at the mathematical processes, properties of the Markov decision chains in order to code, in order to do the modeling of data and information so that the protocols are intelligent in e-government distributed system. And in order to do this, we are using the Bellman equation because this is very easy to interpolate and to code in Java. And the key variables there that we need to look at is the alpha and the gamma, the alpha which is the learning rate and the gamma which is the discount rate. I won't get into the details, but this is about an agent interacting with an environment. The more an agent interacts with the environment, the more learning takes place. And this learning adds on to the knowledge that already exists. So this is reinforcement learning, which is very important in order to achieve continuous intelligence and automation in business, in e-government business processes. So we are actively looking at this area in my research teams, and we are happy that some progress is being made. Now, a bit about the status of e-government development. It's clear that the global north, countries such as South Korea, Singapore, Japan, USA, Canada, have done a lot, and they've developed a lot in as far as AI augmented government is concerned, because they've invested heavily in their ICT infrastructure, especially progressive ICT infrastructure, which can take care of AI-enabled government. On the African continent, many countries are saying that they've implemented e-government, but I can assure you that a lot is just rhetoric. There are so many challenges that the African continent faces, underdeveloped ICT infrastructure, and so forth. But the picture is not all that gloomy, as certain countries in Africa have dedicated AI strategies, South Africa, Mauritius, Rwanda. And when we're looking at South Africa, there's a lot of leadership that is put in place, especially starting with the Presidential Commission for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, where our Vice Chancellor is co-chairing that commission. There are also dedicated projects that are being implemented, such as Source to Pay, also the Gauteng broadband network. These look promising, and I think we are going in the right direction in as far as e-government development is concerned. So the final remarks, it is clear that AI augmented government is a source of greater competitiveness because it reduces on the cost of public service delivery. Universities need to jump on the bandwagon in order to develop AI competences. And I think UJ is doing well in that regard. Two of my PhD students are working on the core of AI. One is developing adaptive information architecture, which is adaptive warehouses based on AI. Another one is investigating the key competences and skills that are needed for the fourth industrial revolution. And I think that is going to complement on what the World Economic Forum has done. So we need to build intelligent systems based on the cloud. Cloud computing is evolving. We are now talking about fog computing. And as I've demonstrated, there are a lot of research opportunities that researchers can follow. And African countries also need to seriously consider the question of AI augmented government. And now that the blueprint is already there, they can actually look at that and do something about it in their own contextual settings. Now, when I come to the end of my presentation for the next 5 minutes, I would like to quickly show you some photos. And these photos tell a story of where I'm coming from and where I'm going. My research started when I was doing my master's degree. I wrote a paper from my research, and that paper was voted as the best paper at Korea Information Processing Society. After that paper, I got so much interest in research. And I told myself that there is nothing that I can do other than research, and that's why I've been researching for the last 15 years or so. This picture shows you where I come from in Zambia. What you see there are my people. And in that part of the world, there's a local drink, a very strong local drink, which contains about 30% ethanol, which is produced using what is called fractional distillation. If you've done some form of science or chemistry, you know that fractional distillation is used to separate different components, soluble and insoluble components. So they're using fractional distillation in order to come up with a very strong drink, which is about 30% ethanol, which can be compared to the common brands of whiskey. So with science, we know that there is a future There's a hope for our people, and that gets me very excited. In the next slide, although I come from Lusaka, I went to school in Livingstone. Livingstone is 460 kilometers from Lusaka. In 2019, I managed to convince our executive dean, Diel, to accompany me to a conference, a policy conference in Livingstone. When we went there, we enjoyed ourselves. As you can see on the top left, you have a deck just on the banks of the river, the Zambezi River, where we had a very good lunch. On the top right, we have my school, which is Hillcrest. I took Diel there so that he can appreciate my humble beginnings, where I come from. And down there on the right, you can see the Curious Shop. I took Diel so that I can demonstrate my negotiating skills. So if you plan to go to to Livingstone, please consider hiring Diel as your tour guide. I promise you, you won't be bored. In this one, I'm just showing my professional journey. On the top left, I just given a keynote speech in Botswana, and that was right at the end. And that shows that we keep interacting with policymakers. That is the Minister of Youth Development in Botswana. On the top right, that was me in Hong Kong, explaining the gymnastics of blockchain as applied in EGovernment to a technical committee of the data science group, to an organization where I belong. Down there, you can see me with Professor Lee from Seoul National University, one of my very good friends and one of the key researchers in EGovernment at a global level. And down there, you can see me still at Samsung, after playing beach football. We told ourselves that we shouldn't be working every day. We should find some time to relax. So that was us at the beach. I've been researching in EGovernment for quite a long time. And what you see here are a couple of my presentations, not all of them, but the major outputs, book chapters appearing in books. And many of these are the books that I've written. We've actually managed to write 9 books. 3 of them were written, and 6 of them were edited, and a couple of book chapters. So there's quite a big body of knowledge in EGovernment that we've contributed. And I think we're at the right time to locate EGovernment at the core of the 4th Industrial Revolution. So that was it. That's what I wanted to share. Thank you for your attention, and have a good evening.
Vice-Chancellor Functionary, Mrs. Nolwazi Mamorare, Executive Dean, College of Business and Economics, Professor Diel van Diel, the distinguished inductee, Professor Kelvin J. Bwalya, and all esteemed members of the audience here present and online. It is an honor for me to respond to the professorial inaugural lecture that we've just heard from Professor Bwalya, in which he recounts his 10-year-plus journey to this pinnacle of academic achievement and outlines his vision for reaching even greater mountain peaks over the next 10 years and more. Since Professor Bwalya began his lecture with an African proverb, I feel compelled to begin my response with one too. Someone once said, "A proverb is a short statement about a long experience." So let me start with this short statement, a proverb from the Bemba-speaking peoples of Central and Southern Africa, mainly in Zambia, that captures something of the long experience that has brought Professor Bwalya to this momentous point today. Ababemba batila ati, umwana ashenda, atasha nyina ukunaya. Loosely translated, the Bembas say, a child who never journeys from home only praises the cooking of his mother. In his professorial journey, Professor Bwalya has traveled far and wide from home, literally and metaphorically, and has continued to add to his vast intellectual palette over the years. Three major themes, it seems to me, emerged from Professor Bwalya's journey, which he so vividly described to us in his lecture. And since he will be shortly formally capped and gowned as full Professor of Business Information Systems, I shall briefly touch on each of these three themes using the acronym CAP. QAP, that is, not CAP. First, Q is for quality. Professor Bwalya's work has always been marked by the highest standards of quality. It's interesting to note that his most cited article, and one of his earliest, Factors Affecting Adoption of EGovernment in Zambia, was published in 2009 in the Electronic Journal of Information Systems in Developing Countries. When that article was published, he wasn't even 30 years old. And yet, this article continues to be cited to this day by scholars from around the world in various disciplines, and it remains one of the key foundation stones of Professor Bwalya's ongoing seminal work on e-government in developing world contexts. Second, A is for agility. Throughout his career, Professor Bwalya has demonstrated an aptitude for mastering and combining different, traditionally separate domains. Realizing the vision of AI augmented government requires integrating several emerging technologies, such as machine learning, robotic process automation, blockchain, topology and information architecture design, protocol design, cloud and fog computing, 5G and 6G networks, among many others. Specifically, Professor Bwalya has laid out an ambitious research agenda involving what we could summarize as smart cities and infrastructure, smart public services, and smart policy and governance. Delivering on this ambitious agenda calls for considerable research agility, something with which Professor Bwalya is well endowed, based on his track record. Finally, P is for productivity. When I asked my youngest son, an accomplished public speaker, for his advice on my response, he said I should avoid statistics and focus on personal stories which showcase the best sides of the inductee. Unfortunately, that spoiled my plans for this section, where I was going to eulogize Professor Bwalya in glorious numerical detail. Citations and citation indices, publications and impact factors, students supervised and graduated, collaborations and collaborators, and so on and so forth. But I'll take my son's advice and end with a personal story instead. I first met in quotation marks, Professor Bwalya through his most cited article, the 2009 one I mentioned earlier. You see, I had been working on my own article on e-government in Zambia, later published in 2012 in the African Journal of Information and Communication. As I was doing my literature survey, I came across Professor Bwalya's excellent article and incorporated and cited it. In fact, it is the very first source in the list of references. Little did I know just how productive that chance meeting would be, and how almost 10 years later I would be standing here to celebrate with all of you the remarkable results of Professor Bwalya's academic productivity. So much for CAP, QAP. On to the CAP, CAP, and of course that beautiful gown. Congratulations, Professor Bwalya.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd now like to call upon Professor Diel van Lille to perform the robing of Professor Bwalya.
Thank you. And the limit restriction is on. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, please join me in congratulating Professor Kelvin Bwalya on that excellent lecture and on this very, very momentous achievement and occasion of today. On behalf of the University of Johannesburg, I would like to wish him all of the best in his career and future endeavors. We have now come to the end of our proceedings for this evening, and I would like to thank you all for your participation and wish you a good evening. Thank you. Diel. Good night.
The University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.